Welcome to the Zen Studies Podcast. I'm Domio Burke. Thanks to new supporting members of the podcast, Kimberly from New Germany, Nova Scotia in Canada, Joplin from Olympia, Washington, Matthew from London in the UK, Jean from Evanston, Illinois, and Philip from Columbus, Ohio. If you are a monthly, quarterly, biannual, or annual donor to the podcast, thank you. Are you ready to explore practicing Zen with other people, but live far from a Zen center? Join me live on Zoom for Zen practice on Tuesday evenings from 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Time, or 9:30 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. Pacific Time on Sundays. We sit Zazen, we do some chanting, we have a short social break, and then a class or a Dharma talk. You're welcome to arrive or leave at any time. Visit brightwayzen.org for more information, or you can find links to that info on the podcast website. That's zenstudiespodcast.com. So this is one of my question and answer episodes. I work my way through the questions you send by email, more or less in the order I receive them, unless maybe I get two questions that relate closely to each other, and then I might group them together. So I don't have too many questions waiting for next month. Two of the questions I've received are about practicing Zen with a disability or chronic illness, and I'm going to make those the subject of my next full episode. So I'm a little short of questions, so please submit them through the podcast website, zenstudiespodcast.com, as I said. Your question can be practical, profound, or anything in between. So getting to it. Back in February, Joel wrote, I believe you covered this in an episode, but I would like to hear your thoughts on it in our current context. What is the responsibility of Buddhists to stand up for what is right? In this case, standing against the current presidential administration. What is the role of bodhicitta in this action? I would love to hear your thoughts in general on the current situation with the United States government. So this is, in some senses, a tricky question that part of me wants to avoid. And why is that? It's not because I think these are unimportant questions or that I'm unwilling to wrestle with them. I think most of you know that I spend quite a lot of time wrestling with these kinds of questions. It's more because you may be dissatisfied with my answer, or other listeners, almost inevitably, someone will be dissatisfied, and perhaps profoundly so. Perhaps stop listening or stop supporting the podcast. It reminds me of the koan from the Mumonkan, or Gateless Gate. This translation is by Koun Yamada. Quote, Master Kyogen said, It's like a man up a tree, hanging from a branch by his mouth. His hands cannot grasp a branch, his feet won't reach a bough. Suppose there is another man under the tree who asks him, What is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West? If he does not respond, he goes against the wish of the questioner. If he answers, he will lose his life. At such a time, how should he respond? Mumon's commentary. Even if your eloquence flows like a river, it is of no use. Even if you can expound the whole body of the sutras, it is of no avail. If you can respond to it fittingly, you will give life to those who have been dead and put to death those who have been alive. If, however, you are unable to do this, wait for Maitreya to come and ask him. Maitreya is the Buddha of the future. This is really our koan as Buddhists. We must respond. And yet, if we respond, we lose our life. What does this mean? Any time that we respond, it requires us to engage in the relative world, in the world of the dependent dimension. It requires us to get down into the weeds. Inevitably, we lose some perspective as we do this. Things get messy and complicated. Our responses always miss something, and they end up insufficient or incomplete. If you don't think this is the case, you may have just done a lot of thinking about action and response. But if you look at the kind of responses you offer in your personal life as well as out in the world, this is the direction inevitably that things go. And this is not a reason not to respond. In fact, from the very beginning of Buddhism and original Buddhism, generosity was a prerequisite for spiritual practice. It wasn't held up exactly as the kind of sign of interdependence or great aspiration that it is in Mahayana, but it was definitely considered to be a prerequisite. Like selfishness was going to get in the way of your spiritual practice. So we have to respond to need. And then, of course, we have the Mahayana Bodhisattva ideal, which we are going to postpone our own escape into nirvana in order to take rebirth in the world again and again in order to save all beings along with ourselves. So that going back into the world and taking rebirth in the land of the relative again and again, in a sense, is this: as soon as we respond, we get caught up in the world again. But standing back, remaining silent, you might say attachment to the large perspective, is selfish and deluded. We think we are separate from all things somehow, or that our mental and emotional state is something that we can hold on to. And yet, throwing ourselves into the mess without concern for maintaining the larger perspective, this often ends up, despite our best wishes, we actually end up doing harm or no good. We burn out. Within our efforts, we experience divisiveness with other people. We might feel a sense of despair that whatever we're doing is not making a big enough difference. So, as Buddhists, our responsibility is balance. So this is exemplified in a beautiful symbolic way by the three bodhisattva figures that are often displayed in a Soto Zen temple together as a kind of a trio. And one of these is Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, often associated with meditation, with deep insight into emptiness. Then there's Avalokiteshvara, or Kanzeon, who's the bodhisattva of compassion, responding to need without a sense of separation at all. The response just arises from the universe. In a sense, Avalokiteshvara is just allowing it to flow. So this is that ideal of compassion. When we truly awaken and we see we're not separate from any being, then to respond to the suffering of any being is like responding to our own need. And then the third figure is Samantabhadra, or the bodhisattva of loving activity. And he is responding to the needs of beings as well, but in a more, maybe with concern for beings' long-term welfare, thinking not just in terms of in this moment you need food or in this moment you need comfort, but working for the welfare of all beings in a longer-term way. So this is a never-ending process within balancing, how much time do we spend sitting in meditation? How much time do we spend trying to be of benefit to others? When we are trying to be of benefit to others, are we just responding immediately to the requests of others, or are we really working to be beneficial in the world in a larger or longer-term sense? So this personal process of continual discernment, and as I think is the case for all aspects of our Buddhist practice, this is about doing our own practice. So in a sense, the question, what is the responsibility of Buddhists to stand up for what is right? In a way, it's like you say, it is the responsibility of Buddhists to stand up for what is right and to discern in their hearts what that means. What is right? What is standing up? What can you do? So doing our own practice means that we aspire to fulfill this ideal ourselves and support others in their efforts to do the same, but we don't decide for others what that will look like. That can sound kind of wishy-washy, but that is the nature of this practice. It's not about saying what Buddhists, with a capital B, looking out there at all Buddhists, saying what they should do. It's about what I as a Buddhist should do. And this includes Dharma teachers. So sometimes there's an expectation for Dharma teachers to use the influence that they have in their communities to encourage people to make certain decisions or align in certain political ways or whatever. And I can certainly understand that that urge, that sometimes it is very, very compelling. And certainly there are times to do it. One of my Dharma teachers, Kyogen Carlson, rarely ever took a public stand. I mean, as a personally, he made decisions as a citizen, but he rarely took a public stand as a teacher until there was a statewide referendum coming up that was going to threaten the freedoms of LGBTQ people. And we had many people in the Sangha who qualified in that, and he felt it was his responsibility to come out against that referendum. So when are we going to make that call? What do you feel called to address? And in terms of that question about bodhicitta, your way-seeking mind, for many of us, it feels like finding a way to address the suffering in the world and respond is part of our practice. It's not separate from our practice. And it asks us to practice tough love with ourselves, to ask us to really face the suffering, the difficult truths, to educate ourselves, and to be ready to respond with compassion. But also keeping beings' long-term well-being in mind, or samantabhadra, and maintaining our clarity, groundedness, and perspective, like Manjushri. For me, if I feel like if I am going to live according to my Buddhist vows, my aspirations, I need to take tangible action for what I hope for in the world. And, in one sense, you could say many of the things that I do are beneficial, like being a priest, being a leader of a Zen center, and fostering community, and maybe doing this podcast. But I also feel called to try to bring about change, to address the climate and ecological emergency, to stand against the selling of lies as truth, to speak against the scapegoating of immigrants as a way to consolidate power and distract from the real causes of our problems. And the list goes on. And it's not that I can personally address each thing, of course, but that I will try to do my part, try to do something. This is why I have started a pilot project at my Zen center, which I hope might be adopted elsewhere, called the Buddhist Mobilization Project, BUMP, B-U-M-P. And you can find more about this at BuddhistMobilizationProject.org. And basically trying to get around this sticky matter of somehow deciding for the Sangha what it is that we are supposed to do, how it is we are supposed to respond, what it is we're supposed to stand up for, but asking people, finding a way for people to be accountable to each other so that they start to fulfill their own aspirations for response. And this is the mission statement of BUMP. Because we are not separate from all beings, because our practice is not separate from responding with generosity, compassion, and wisdom, the Buddhist Mobilization Project aims to create the support of Sangha for practicing Buddhists who are committed to acting for what they hope for in the world. We create Sangha to help members discern what actions to take, begin taking action, and sustain action. So if you are interested in perhaps starting a BUMP group at your Sangha or something, just visit that site and send me an email. But even though I've started this project, only a small fraction of my Sangha are involved. There's lots of different reasons for that. People are busy with families or health issues or whatever, or they have their own ways of taking action and they don't feel a need to take part in this. And you can't force people to do anything, and shame and pressure don't help. And this is my way, right? I feel like maybe if there's advice to be given to any Buddhist in general, it's that we must try to fulfill our aspirations with great energy and diligence. And it's easy not to fulfill your aspirations, to let them just remain intellectual or to come up with excuses. This is why the support of Sangha can really help. But I also value and hold a place for in my mind the people who manifest something different with their life. So, for example, one of my teachers focuses his life energy on supporting and leading a monastery and offering regular sesshin and encouraging people to wake up to the absolute, to the independent dimension of reality. He's like a constant spokesperson for that. And that is what he does, right? That's not saying that's what everyone should do, but I value incredibly that someone is doing that part. And you might even, sometimes people bring up, well, what about the hermit off on a mountaintop meditating? What good are they doing to the world, for the world? And it's a subtle thing, but even though in a tangible sense perhaps you could say they are not a being of benefit, there's a subtle way in which that they are still part of the world. And that just my knowledge that some people live like that, live that simple life, simple contemplative life in contentment, with curiosity about that which is greater, makes the world a different place for me, gives me perspective. So, moving on. Leah wrote, "Dissociation is defined as a spectrum of pathological states of detachment from reality. A friend of mine says she was afraid of Zen, specifically Zazen, because she feared this state of dissociation. I have to admit, now that I've looked into it, it does seem like Buddhist detachment from clinging or aversion resembles this. Could it be that dissociation is misunderstood? Maybe it's okay? Is what we're doing in Zen actually in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders? My intuition tells me that Zazen is the opposite of a mental disorder. However, when faced with explaining this to the person, heck, I need some help." So I am not a psychiatrist, of course, to start off, and I should make a clear disclaimer that if you have any mental health issues, be very attentive to the effects of meditation on your mind and body. And if you have serious mental health issues, preferably do your meditation with guidance from a mental health professional or a meditation teacher. Now, if your mental health issues tend toward the anxiety side of the spectrum, that usually just seems to make it more difficult to sit. But Zazen is unlikely to be a problem for you. But if you tend toward more the depressive or dissociative side, kind of involving a deadening of emotions, distancing yourself from troubling feelings or experiences, suppression of thoughts or memories, then it is possible for you to be sitting and sliding further into these states rather than really sitting Zazen. Zazen and our broader practice includes everything and asks us to experience and face everything fully, not avoiding anything or cutting anything off. I like to think of this as opening the doors of the mind, practicing don't know mind. There's no attempt to be unaffected, no attempt to censor emotional responses. So sometimes emotional responses come up, sometimes memories come up, sometimes, thoughts and aversions. And we learn gradually by doing that practice that things pass through us. They don't kill us. They often just facing it, even if the feelings and thoughts or memories or whatever are painful, that allowing them in and then to pass is cathartic, even healing. And we learn that we don't have to be overwhelmed by feelings and experiences. And then over time, as we open up to reality with a capital R, even as we experience greater emotional equanimity due to our greater perspective, we feel more intimate with everything, more aware. And we aren't as upset, but we feel more present, not less. So in terms of that clinging and aversion, the Buddhist practice is asking us to, kind of the ideal, right, is we would be free of clinging and aversion. But we don't get there by force of will, right? By sitting in meditation and pushing away clinging and aversion, denying it. They're all part of what's going on. They're all part of it. But because we are present and aware, we see them for what they are. We see their effects. And then our job is to renounce what causes suffering. If we want suffering to end, that is. If we want suffering to end, then when we notice that clinging causes suffering, actually we just naturally learn to let go of clinging. When we recognize how aversion causes us extra suffering, we just naturally learn to let go of aversion. I mean, the easiest and simplest answer to this question is really to just look at the fruits of practice. And if something unhelpful, like further dissociation, is the result, then we're going about something wrong. Is our life getting better or worse? Do we continue to feel stuck, distant from people? Do unpleasant or unhelpful mind states remain unchanged or get worse? Then probably what we're doing in Zazen is not Zazen. Or do we feel just a little bit more sane as we go about our everyday life? Are there more openings for behaving differently in our lives? On a related topic, Susie wrote, how would you describe the desirable level of overlap between shikantaza, the zazen of just sitting, and trance? It's my impression that trance states are not what shikantaza is pointing toward, as the word trance has not come up in my Zen studies. It's not like I have some clear idea about what a trance state really is, and I'm not sure I've ever even been in an official trance state. Yet sometimes in Zazen, I feel transported, while notably dull in some of my senses. For example, I'm definitely not at my most visually acute. In fact, my eyes are often blurred. At the bell, it feels like there is a transition back to ordinary consciousness. Chanting can also feel like it invokes a trance-like state, and I like how it feels. The human mind, so amazing, so many different states, probably infinitely many, just hundreds of them. Hundreds of them would be measurable, but even if we, quantified 100 different states of mind, this would probably just be simplifying reality into categories. We can be concentrated in direct effort, just aware of one thing. We can have open awareness in just sitting, where everything just comes and goes. We can be watching an absorbing movie. We can be transported by beautiful music. We can be completely engaged in a complex mental task, or completely absorbed in a physical task. We can be enjoying silence in nature. Many different states of mind. Now, like you, I don't know that I've really been in a trance, and there's probably different kinds of trance. But one thing that I think they have in common is that absorption in an internal landscape, losing awareness of what's going on around you. And I've probably spent some time in trance-like states while supposedly sitting Zazen, in the depth of session, when it feels like there's just like a luminous universe inside my head. And then there's there's a sense of disappointment when the bell rings. That perspective, that vision or insight, or this sense of being on the verge of melting into everything disappears. Now, some such experiences are probably what in Buddhism would be called a samadhi state. One-pointed concentration. I've done an episode or two on samadhi. And such states happen sometimes. We're not trying to avoid them or seek them. But what are we seeking? What is true Zazen, wholehearted shikantaza? Maybe more defined by what it is not. It's sitting that includes everything. The body, the thoughts that arise and pass away, your longing, your resistance, your surroundings, without the added distinctions between self and other, inside and outside, desirable or not. So it's easy to assume that this way of being, this way of sitting, will not lead to anything in particular, not lead to spiritual wholeness or awakening to reality or liberation from fear or whatever. But it does. I like to think of, it's always tricky drawing the line between like good Zazen and bad Zazen and all of that. But when I really feel like I am sitting wholeheartedly, and again, more defined by what is not happening than what is, I'm very, very still and connected, and everything does seem very luminous, and the ineffable seems imminent in all things. But at the same time, if there was an emergency, somebody in the Zendo started having a heart attack, I could leap right up and respond. There would be no transition. In fact, if I would probably be more responsive in that state of Zazen than in my usual mind wandering, right? Very alive, attentive, undefended. Because whatever we experience in true Zazen, and in Zen sometimes we say even the true samadhi, does not disappear when the bell rings. It is not something obstructed by our body, by our need to get up and eat, by our karma. Now, certain mind states may arise. My teacher Kyogen would say it's like we make a lap for a cat, and sometimes samadhi comes and curls up. It's a state. States come and go, and sometimes they allow us to perceive something in a new way. So we certainly don't need to worry about them and try to make them stop or go away, but also it's good to realize that they are not it. So that's it for today. I will be back very soon with a new episode. I hope you'll tune in. Thanks for listening.